The true self knows, the guides say, and the small self thinks.
One thing I'd like to break down a little bit is when we talk about the divine self versus the small self. I feel like sometimes this gets confusing for people, but what is the divine self? And I guess even more importantly is, how do we know when we are really operating from the divine self versus the smaller self?
You know, I'm still operating as my small self the bulk of the time. I have access to the other, and I know the difference. And the real difference is there's no fear. You're operating beyond fear. You're not catalyzed by fear. So the guides would say, you know, the guides have defined the Christ, and they don't talk about Christ in terms of personage. They talk about Christ as the seed of the divine that seeks expression, that seeks to flower as and through its creation. So that's the idea of the divine as you. You can't make yourself holy, you already are, but what you have done, and we've all done, is deny that. They say the denial of the divine is really our only problem. If we could get past that, everything would shift, because we'd have a very different experience of ourselves and of everybody else. But we're so entrenched in all of this information that's so reductive to our true nature. You're as good as your last job. You know, if your marriage fails, you're a failure. If you lose your job, who are you? If you're not beautiful, you know, by traditional standards, you're unlovable. All this crap that we've amassed and we operate in exchange with. This becomes currency. Who's the best looking one at the party, and who's the one you should meet to get what you want. All that stuff, that's all small self. The guides say the true self could care less what anybody else thinks of him or her, you know, and that's not an arrogance. That's just, she is not looking for that reflection, doesn't require it, because he, she, it knows who it is, regardless of outcome or circumstance. So they also call it the monad, which I guess is, I don't even know the definition of monad probably correctly, but I've understood it to be the piece of the whole that expresses the whole. So that's the seed that seeks expression. So part of the work of the guides, much of the work of the guides, is releasing that which has stood in the way of this expression, which is primarily fear and all of its creations. You know, it's really not that complicated. So essentially, I suspect what they're saying is that the divine self seeks to become itself as and through everything. You know, that's its job, is realization, and will do so when it is activated and that permission has been granted, because we have free will. We get to choose. They don't override free will.